All right, so we're gonna go over all of chapter 6 main ideas today, because they both talk about the same thing: principles of the Constitution, and then the government that is set up by the Constitution. Okay, so when it says principles of the Constitution, what they're talking about are the 7 key principles or the 7 articles, okay, relating to the Constitution. Okay, so the 7 articles and the 7 principles are the same thing. If you see those, don't get confused. 7 articles, 7 key principles, both the same thing. So we've already talked about in class about the first 3 articles, right, or the first 3 principles. What did they set up? What are 3 things do we have to talk about?
Republican form of government.
No. That's what the Constitution is as a whole. Okay? But the first 3 articles, the first 3 key principles, set up the 3 what? 3 branches of government. Right? So that's what the first 3 articles are. And then we've got 5, 6, and 7, 4, 5, 6, and 7, which we'll talk about next week. But we know the first 3 set up the legislative, executive, and judicial branch. Okay? So that's the first 3 principles. And then into the Constitution, talking about the Constitution here. Our Constitution, this is what you're talking about, sets up a Republican form of government. So what does that mean?
Like everything, like equal, like in power.
Not necessarily. I mean, yeah, we have separation. We have the separation of powers, checks and balances. That's what keeps everything. Okay. But what does a Republican form of government mean?
You elect people.
Right. People have to be elected and chosen, voted into office. Right. When they say, you may have heard, it's a government for the people, by the people, meaning it's a government created for the people of that country, and it's created by the people of that country, meaning those people of the country vote in people into office. Okay. So the United States has a federal government in which the many state governments and the single federal government share some powers and divide up others. That's what we're talking about: enumerated powers and reserved powers. Okay, reserved powers are those powers reserved for the state. Enumerated are given to Congress by the Constitution. I'll probably highlight that slide, that second bullet on this slide right here, that says that the United States has a federal government in which the many state governments and single federal government share some powers and divide up others. That'd be a good one to highlight. And the Constitution separates the powers of the 3 branches of the government and sets up checks and balances so each branch can check or limit the power of the other branches. So I would make sure to highlight something about checks and balances, okay, and how they limit the power of the other branches, okay, because we know that will be on your test for sure. We talked about checks and balances before, and it keeps coming up. That's just a big flashing light. Hey, this will be on the test. Okay? So make sure you highlight checks and balances, and you know that they limit the power of other branches. Okay? All right, so then amending the Constitution. This, you had this yesterday on your 6.1 guide reading worksheet. It talked about amending the Constitution and told you it's a 2-step process, But anybody know how many amendments there are on the Constitution right now?
27.
27. Good. Okay, so now let's think about it. We have 27 amendments over the last 230 years. And if you really think about it, 10 of them are the Bill of Rights, which happened immediately after the Constitution was ratified. Okay? So really 17 in the last 230 years. And of those 17, there are a couple. So we talked about women's rights, women's suffrage, women's right to vote. That's one. Okay, that one probably should have been included from the beginning. Then ending slavery. That's another one that probably should have been included from the beginning. Slaves' right to vote. Again, kind of goes hand in hand. Those 2 came at the same time. Then you talk about prohibition. So now right there, we're down to 14. We talk about prohibition. You guys know what prohibition is? Prohibition, that was the 18th Amendment. And what that did is made all alcohol illegal in the 1920s. Okay, so that prohibition made alcohol illegal with the 18th Amendment. That lasted about 10 years, somewhere in there. Not exactly sure on that. But then with the 21st Amendment, they repealed prohibition, which means they cancel it out. They cancel out the 18th Amendment. So there's two amendments sitting in our Constitution now that are just basically cancel each other out, so they might as well not even be in it because it just reverted everything back to the original. Okay, does that make sense? The 21st cancels out the 18th. Okay, so now we're down to 12. Okay, so 12 amendments basically in the last 230 years. Not bad. Heck, I mean, some of you probably changed clothes 27 times before you leave the house, right? So 27 changes to the Constitution in 230 years. Not bad. Means they did a pretty good job with the first draft, right? With the original. Now, that's not to say it's easy to change the Constitution. They made it a hard process on purpose. All right, they didn't make it easy to change the Constitution because they didn't want it to be easy. Because think about it, like if you're playing, you ever play the game of telephone, where you tell somebody, and, so it could say somebody in the circle could start with marshmallow and get all the way back around and talking about broccoli, green M&Ms. Some of them don't even sound right. Okay, now that's what they didn't want to happen with the Constitution. They didn't want to put something out there and then in 50 years or whatever, it'd be totally changed to something that this document doesn't even really matter anymore. Okay. Think about the Articles of Confederation lasted 9 years. They didn't want to just start amending them and make it a whole different document and still call it the same thing. They totally scrapped it, right? And started all over with the Constitution. So that's what they made amending the Constitution hard for a reason. Okay? Now, with it only being a two-step process, that doesn't sound too hard, right? But look at the 2 steps. The first step in amending the Constitution is the formal proposal of an amendment by 2/3 of Congress. All right, and what makes up Congress?
State.
No.
Or representative.
2 houses. Senators and House of Representatives. Okay, Senate and House of Representatives. All right. So 2/3. Say there's, we know there's 100 senators, and we'll say there's 550 representatives. Okay, there's somewhere, maybe 450, somewhere. We'll just say 550 for the sake of argument. Right. So you need 2/3 of all of Congress. So out of 650 people, you probably need somewhere around 400, 425 people to approve even approve the proposal. Okay, this isn't even to approve the amendment to go into order. This is to approve the proposal to where it can even be voted on. Okay. Now they don't get 2/3 of Congress to agree to the formal proposal. They go to a convention called by 2/3 of the states. All right. So this means that 2/3 of the states is about 34. 34 of the 50 states have to agree and come to this convention and set up this to propose this amendment. All right. Now the second step is ratification. Everybody know what ratification or ratify means? To approve. Okay, it means approval. So the second step is approval, which is ratification, which requires approval by 3/4 of the states. So 3/4 of the states have to approve this law. So this amendment, amendment to the Constitution. So that means you're looking at about between 38 and 40, probably we'll say 40 states. They have to approve this amendment for it to go into effect. All right. Now, that's how it's amended. Those 2 steps are how it's amended. The language of the Constitution has also been subject to different interpretations over the years. So what does that mean? What do they mean when they're talking about the language of the Constitution? Is it written in Spanish? No, so what do they mean? What does that mean? Yeah. Wait. Say that again.
What it means?
What the Constitution means?
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, how somebody interprets what it says. Okay, so if we go back and read the Constitution in your book, you can go read it, but you're probably not going to understand very much of it, right? It's 230 years old. It's not written the way we talk now. It's written how they spoke in 1790. It'll be a little different than what we speak in 2020, right? Okay, so I mean, there are things that say, and based on how they interpret, when they say "we the people," are they talking about all people? Or are they talking about adult white males?
All adult.
All right, or then they say all men are created equal. Are they talking about just adult white males, or are they talking about everybody in the United States? Now, that may have been the interpretation, but now the interpretation is everybody in the United States. Okay, so interpretations have changed. They're subject to different interpretation, but that's where the Supreme Court comes in under the judicial branch. Because the Supreme Court is the highest court. Anything that gets to the Supreme Court, and they have the final rule. Okay, that's literally the Supreme Court's job is to interpret the Constitution. Okay, and rule on based on their interpretations of the Constitution. All right, so it's like if we read like everybody knows the Second Amendment, right? The right to keep and bear arms.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? I can go kill a bear, chop its arm off, and put it in my wall. Right, chop my arm off and replace it with a bear arm. No, I mean we're talking about guns, right? Now, obviously somebody comes over here and reads that for the first time, they're like, "What? Why do people bears arms?" But well, we know that because we've studied it and we've talked about it. Okay, so interpretations change. The way it reads changes based on the time that we're talking about. Okay, so moving on to 6.2, talking about the government and its people and how the people interact with the government on different issues. So these, you should know, guys, we've talked about these. These are talking about the different branches. So what branch does Congress fall under? The blank branch of the federal government. Legislative branch. Okay, so erase that blank and put legislative branch in there. Okay? The legislative branch of the federal government has two houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate. Okay, what does the legislative branch do with the laws? They create the laws. Okay? Legislative branch is in charge of creating the laws. All right, the second one, the blank branch of the federal government is led by the president and vice president. Executive branch, because they execute or carry out the laws passed by Congress. Okay, and the third one, the Supreme Court, is at the top of the blank branch of the federal government, has the power of judicial review. The judicial branch. Okay? So, what does the judicial branch do with the laws? No. Interprets. Okay? Executive branch carries them out, and the Supreme Court or the judicial branch interprets the laws. That's their job, is to interpret what the law says, determine if it's constitutional or unconstitutional, and make final rulings on those laws. Okay? All right, so what it means to be a citizen. In America, there are different ways to become a citizen. You don't have to just be born in America. You can be a naturalized citizen, which means you can move here and immigrate here. You have to go through the whole step-by-step process, pass the test, all that stuff. The two ways to be born a citizen of the United States, there are two ways. There's one called jus soli, okay, which is called law of the soil, which basically means you were born on American soil. That makes you an American citizen, okay? The other one is called jus sanguine, I believe. It means law of blood. What that means is that one of your parents at least is an American citizen, okay? And so since you are that parent's blood, therefore you are an American citizen, okay? So what does that mean? If you are an American, or if your parents are American, but they were in another country when you were born, are you an American citizen? Yes, because both of your parents are American citizens, okay? And by blood, it makes you an American citizen. So I'd say, like, I have a friend in high school. His parents were from America. They were born in America. And his parents were missionaries. When he was born, his parents were on mission in a place called Suriname, which is in South America. He was born there, in Suriname. So he's an American citizen because his parents are, but he's also a citizen of Suriname because he was born in that country. So that makes it, he has what's called dual citizenship. Okay? That means he is a citizen of both countries. Alright, and that happens time and time again, depending on different outcomes, different reasons, blah blah blah. Okay?
But do you feel like, like the census or whatever, when they count everybody, would he count for both countries? Or would it just be the one?
I think it's going to be whichever one you have residency. Whichever one you're living in at the time. That's a good question. Yeah, so I believe it's the one you're living in at the time. So, and like I said, there are numerous ways you can get a visa that allows you to work in America, then go through this process of becoming a naturalized citizen. And it may take a while. It does. Some of them takes a long time. Okay, but there's a reason for that, because not only because it's hard to do, but because there's a long line of people trying to get into the United States. All right, they just have to make sure everybody that's coming in is good. Okay, so the reason a lot of people come to the United States is because of all the many rights and liberties that American citizens enjoy. Okay, now we get all these rights and liberties with the caveat that we are going to stay within the confines of the law. All right, so we have limits. Rights and freedoms of U.S. citizens have some limits, which must be applied equally to all people. So basically, don't go break the law, and you can do basically whatever you want. Don't go outside shooting people, and you can worship whatever you want to worship. You have freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of petition. You can protest. You can say whatever you want, as long as you're not breaking the law. It's your right. It is your right as an American citizen to do that. Okay? But these must be equally applied to all people, which is kind of where things get great for some people, I guess. Being a citizen of the United States involves a number of responsibilities, including obeying the law, which we were just talking about. As long as you obey the law, you have religious freedom, freedom of speech, all that stuff. Okay? And voting. All right, so voting is a big one. Voting is how your voice gets heard. Voting is how your if you don't vote, your voice doesn't get heard. If your voice doesn't get heard, you are not represented in Congress or as the president or the governor or as the mayor, whatever. Okay, that means if you don't vote, then you don't get to gripe about who the president is, who the governor or mayor is at the time. Okay, because you didn't vote. So you are just basically you're voting for the winner if you don't vote. Okay, so who in here is 14 right now? Okay, so all you guys will get to vote for the next president. Okay, because you'll be 18 by the time it's time to vote again in 4 years from now, right? So you guys will get to vote for not whoever the one after this in 2024. Okay, and anybody's birthday like in October or September? Okay, you guys will have to go vote, or you'll have to go register like before you're actually 18. But you can do that and just say, I'm registering early so that I can vote in the presidential election. You guys will know all that once you get closer to that time in 4 years. But so that's what I'm saying. When you guys turn 18, go vote. Don't think that your one vote doesn't matter, because it does. And because if we look right now at the United States Congress, the average age of the United States Congress is like 75. Okay? 75 or something like that, in the 70s. Okay? You know what the average age of American citizens is? It's between it's like 45 to 50. Okay, so almost a 30-year difference. Okay? So all these, we'll call them elderly people, are in the Congress, right, making these laws, making these laws and passing them down to us. are not very representative of the people that are 18 to 55. Okay, who these laws are affecting. So what that tells you is that the younger people aren't going out and voting. They aren't taking it serious. The only people that are voting are the older people. And that's why these older people are staying in office. So, and people can gripe all they want. Nobody's representing you. Well, if you don't go vote, you really don't have a say. You can't gripe. Okay? So, that's another story. But it is your duty. If you don't go vote, you are giving up your right to vote. And that's like giving away one of your rights as an American citizen if you do not go vote. Okay? All right. Any questions about what we just talked about? We'll get more. Like next week, we're going to talk about the articles. And then after that, we're going to get into the Bill of Rights. And then we'll talk about the rest of the amendments after that. Okay? Next week, I'll just give you a heads up. Thursday, we're going to do a vocab quiz. Friday, we're going to do a Bill of Rights quiz. Okay? Now, it's going to basically be 2 vocab quizzes because Bill of Rights, there's only 10 of them. And it's going to be, you're just going to have to name what that Bill of Rights is. You'll get basically the definition. You have to say 1, 2, 10. Okay? It's not very hard, but the Bill of Rights will be in there. Okay? So, just a heads up, that will be happening. So, any questions about the notes? Any questions about what we talked about this week with the Constitution so far? Okay. So you guys have about 15 minutes probably before we have to start getting ready to leave. So make sure you've turned in 6.1 guide reading activity from yesterday before you leave before you leave here today. Other than that, you finish that. Just make sure everything is turned in from this week. Okay.